afternoon and welcome to Tuesday at 2
Hello.
with your hosts, Dave and Selima. This week, we're going to be talking about types of marketing for your website and your products, whatever they may be. And there are basically two types. One is the unpaid and the other is the paid. Both Dave and I had different approaches when we started 10 years ago. And I'm going to hand you over to Dave and I'm going to ask him questions on your behalf. And the first question, Dave, is how did you start?
Thank you. Well, I basically started with free or organic, if you like, marketing for a couple of reasons. One, I'm Scottish, and secondly, I had been made redundant, and I was nearly 50, so mortgage to pay. My partner we had just actually remortgaged their house to start my partner's business, so that was just beginning to sort of kick off. So not a great time to be spending our savings and the redundancy settlement that I got. So I thought I will start off by doing free, whatever methods of free marketing I can find. And I had quite a good mentor at the time who was a very, very good expert blogger. And so I could bend his ear basically at any time. Got a lot of tips from him about how to structure blog posts and that sort of thing. So I basically did that for the first 6 to 12 months. Mainly
12 months,
yeah
12 months you did that. And how many
blog
times a
posts.
week?
I actually blogged certainly at first every day, probably 5 days a week. Not 7 days a week, but obviously it's online, so that wasn't Monday to Friday 9 to 5 by any means, but certainly that was, I tried to generate one every day. I was doing a couple of other things too, but that was the bulk of what I was putting together. And then later on, when that started to generate results, kind of proof of concept, if you like, that started to generate sales. I was doing affiliate marketing. I could then, as you really should do, reinvest some of that back into the business on paid advertising. So really, there's two sides to the coin with free and paid advertising. It depends on the mix you have of time and money. So if you have more money, if you've got a good budget available, it makes sense to go into paid advertising. But you're going to make some mistakes there, and you're going to make some costly mistakes to start with. So the free side, you don't have that risk, but it's very much a longer term strategy. So I would say to people now, do a mix of both, which is what I did pretty, after my first 6 to 12 months. That's what I started to do, but certainly started on mainly blogs and then video, organic videos.
I think today, don't you think though, Dave, to find 5 blogs a week for 12 months, launching a business, I think that would take a longer time. And I think we're moving much more quickly than we were 10 years ago. And people don't read blogs because we just don't read. We read far less. We've said that a number of times.
Yeah, obviously we'll move on slightly, but blogging is just one aspect of what you can do. What you can do on the organic side of things is repurpose that content. So you spend time on one piece of content, say a blog post, but there are a lot of different systems that you can use. And again, this is something maybe for a masterclass a little bit further down the line, but there are a lot of tools that you can use to repurpose that content and syndicate that elsewhere onto different social media platforms and that sort of thing. You can create, I got very much more into video, which is still mainly what I do for marketing, paid and unpaid. So you can write a blog post and then turn that into a video or vice versa. So you've got, traffic really coming from all sorts of different areas. So it's a case of, you're right, it's an awful lot to do. I don't think anyone could really, very few people could just do blogging these days to run an online business.
And to make it individual and unique in every post, that's almost impossible, because if you're going to be repeating somebody else's work, not intentionally, but if you're selling a bicycle, you're going to say the same kind of things as your competitor's going to be saying.
Sure.
It doesn't matter how fabulous it is, but how 5 times a week writing about a bicycle.
Well, there's also there's a bit of link juice, if you like, in actually sharing other people's content as well,
Oh yeah.
that's something that people can do as well, curating other people's content, because at the end of the day, if someone's passed something useful to you, you kind of remember them for it. So that's something that you can leverage a little bit online as well. So if you're curating information that's come from somewhere else and saying that's where you got it from, it's still useful information that your visitor wouldn't have had without you finding it for them. So there's a lot you can do, but you're right. It's very labour intensive, and it's very much a longer term strategy. But if you're starting with, your mix of time and money leans more towards time, as mine did, then it's a good place to start. You can get a lot done, and it's online real estate that can keep working for you. So you've put a lot of work in, and on the day, but it's out there. And
it's definitely if you've been made redundant or you're without a job over 50, obviously you're going to weigh up. Hopefully you've had a redundancy package, but it's knowing that you've got the time to put in more work than the person who is possibly still working full time. And just because you've had a redundancy package doesn't mean to say you have to spend it on paid advertising. One has to be very smart about these things. Paid advertising can be very expensive.
Well, given that both are learning curves, and one is going to be an expensive learning curve,
indeed,
that can influence your choice too.
Indeed, indeed. So yes, slowly with redundancy packages and paid advertising. Want to mention something that we have alluded to, but perhaps we haven't explained very well. The idea of search engine optimization. What does that mean in terms of when you're blogging? Can you
blogging is a really specific kind of writing, because what we're doing is, obviously, we're first and foremost trying to provide useful content to the people that we're aiming at, our target audience, as we talked about last week in marketing. So obviously that is the main goal. But how your website and how your content is evaluated by the big search engines, Google and so on, is by an algorithm. It's, if you imagine, there are probably billions of websites on the planet, and Google and all search engines go through those with a thing called a spider, which is a little bit of code, a bit of, I don't know, electronic coding, something like that. But it goes through every internet in the world every week and every website, and it evaluates. If you're in the salmon fishing niche, for example, it compares all the salmon fishing blog posts and websites and sees which one is offering most value, and that puts it near the top of the page when people are searching for those terms. So search engine optimization is doing everything you can to make your content stand out to these algorithms, these little bits of electronic spiders that are whizzing around.
So it would really involve making sure you use good keywords in your blog.
In the very early days, when that process was very unsophisticated, you've probably seen terrible blog posts, terrible content, which is just full of keyword phrases and almost nothing else. So it doesn't actually read. I mean, there used to be software that would turn a piece of content into something different, but they were just...
I still get those on some of my comments that come into my websites, the ones that have to be filtered. It's done by a bot.
And but in the very early days, and that's actually only 20 years ago, isn't it, really? 20 or so years ago. That was enough to get these unsophisticated search engine spiders to say, well, look, that keyword's in there 600 times. That must be good, and that would get you up there in the rankings. So not anymore. It's very much more sophisticated now, and these, with artificial intelligence being what it is now, these are almost like humans, creepily enough. So you don't have to, you have to be a lot more sophisticated, and it's a good thing because you don't have to be writing content now and thinking, I really must chisel that keyword in there again,
because it's actually shooting yourself in the foot, because people won't read it, because it'll contain the same phrasing and everything else, as does your competitors.
Yes.
And then you're not differentiating yourself from them. Your unique selling point has gone. You have to be original, and that used to be quite difficult in those days, where you had to mention certain phrases in order to get sort of top marks from the search engines, but actually you wanted to say something else because it was the way you wanted to represent your mark, your brand.
Yeah.
It was difficult. Yeah,
absolutely. And you could argue it's a lot easier to be a sort of natural now in your content creation.
Now finally they're looking for originality.
Yes, exactly. And these search engine spiders, bots, if you like, are quite sophisticated, as I mentioned a minute ago. So they don't really need you to be continually saying salmon fishing, salmon fishing, salmon fishing, salmon. They can extract that from your writing without you having to, game the system, as it were. But that, in a nutshell, is search engine optimization. It's a very big subject. There are things that you can do to websites to improve them. It's all about making the process easier and smoother for the search engines to look at your website, evaluate it, and give you a gold star, if you like. And the gold star in this case is
have a plugin on your website.
Plugins again. Sure.
Yeah.
And there are some good ones for blogging, actually. There's some very good ones for blogging that will actually give you a checklist as you go through.
Yeah, I use them.
So you could try a bit more of this, try a bit of that, put some images in, that sort of thing. So, a good one. I think blogging is a good one to do a bit of a more detailed class on.
I think so. Yeah, I think so too. Because if we're coming on to it later about keeping your customers interested, how you can create your content in such a way that is inclusive of other things, but you're still serving the interests of your customer. How about our favorite subject, social media?
Well, social media.
Come on, admit it, Dave.
I don't like it. It was in my day. I remember. Let me tell you. As you know, I was in a band for a very, very long time, way before social media existed. And the first thing I heard about before Facebook and all that stuff was MySpace.
Yeah, MySpace.
And it was the big. I think it's actually still. I think Justin Timberlake now owns that. I don't know what it does anymore, but it was basically a thing for musicians, an early, predecessor of what we now think of as social media. But it wasn't of much use, to be quite honest. And then Facebook came along. I really didn't have a Facebook account for a few years. I think actually when I left work and started doing internet marketing, I got a Facebook account to keep in touch with some of my old friends and colleagues, but also because I knew you could do advertising on that. It was like Google, Facebook, and therefore all the social media stuff that followed. It didn't set out to be massive advertising platforms.
No,
that is
not
what
at all.
it became. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and just because it wasn't, I was never in that habit of documenting every minute detail of my life. And I wasn't used to having cameras all the time either. We didn't have camera phones back then. So it just, when it came along, it wasn't something that was in my DNA. The way it is for people who maybe it came around when they were in their teens. Then I would have probably been quite excited about that, especially if from the band point of view, fabulous. You could, if you had smartphones and stuff at the time, amazing.
Yes.
Didn't have all that, so I just didn't get into it. I've done it since. You have to do it now, unfortunately, but
a bit.
My inclination now is to get someone else to do it for you.
Well, yes.
It's not something I'm going to do.
I use agencies to do it.
Yeah.
I don't have I just don't have I don't know how to speak properly on Twitter. I don't know what the sort of fatuous remarks and you need a young person to do that. A young girl. Girls are very good at that.
And it's a very different style. It's a very different approach as well.
Yeah.
You can't take the same approach as you would in a video or in an advert. this is a video advert or even a blog post. It's a very different approach, and it's not one that I find very natural. So
no, it's not something. I mean, I've done it. I've done it. And but I just thought it felt so cheap on some level. It wasn't representative of what I was trying to do. And you find yourself saying anything just to get people to pay attention, and that is somehow disingenuous. I didn't like that. I have a company that does that if I want that.
Yeah, me too. That's what I use.
Yeah. Now, I of course did it slightly differently from you. I went straight into paid advertising when I decided to do that because I had a cash flow and I had little time, and I mean I can write blogs about anything, and it was never difficult for me to churn something out and put some pretty images in and either boost it on one of the platforms or have an agency take over and do it for me. I would say this, that if you're going to advertise, you need a reasonable budget. Otherwise, I went in with a very good startup budget, and you see the percentages that come in can be quite, the responses can be quite few at the beginning, and you're watching quite a large sum of money going down the drain, and it can be difficult. It can be difficult.
Oh, without a doubt, and it varies hugely on the product or service that you're promoting at the end of the day, because this has been in place for quite a long time now. So again, people who've been marketing for a very long time, they know what. Again, this is probably a bit more advanced than we can really cover today. When you come to sort of paid advertising on things like YouTube or Google or even the social media platforms, you're basically in a bidding war against.
You're in a bidding war.
That is in your niche. So you need to be very careful with your numbers. You need to know your numbers. You need to know what you can afford to spend to get a lead, and you need to know how many of those leads, if you like, are going to turn into sales. So you need to keep an eye on the figures.
And there was always this thing about, is it better to have a load of cheap traffic that give you likes? Or is it better to cut out the outer Philippines and the Polynesia if you're selling a top of the range motorbike?
I think it, generally speaking, is.
Yeah, but there was sort of, say 5-6 years ago, there was this idea, get as many as you can, and then they're not going to be customers, but it looks good on your profile. It's lost money as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you'd sell a motorbike to motorbike lovers, wouldn't you? You wouldn't be selling it.
The problem again with that we've both moaned about is that can be the case on, particularly we're talking social media here again, aren't we? But that can be the case on a Tuesday, but it's completely changed on a Wednesday, particularly with Facebook. They changed on Google, the same, YouTube, any of these platforms, for whatever reason. You're playing on their playing field, and they can change the goalposts whenever they feel like it. I mean, Facebook, for example, I don't think actually pays any attention to likes anymore when they're ranking your pages and so on. So, as you say, that was always the case previously.
So it's very difficult to know how to read your results. It's very difficult to read what's actually happening on social media. What is actually, and it's very difficult to get the answer even from the agencies.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
They can't actually give you a direct answer. Well, I don't know if I ever told you this story, Dave, but in one campaign I did via social media, I had a little girl. Well, I don't think she was that experienced, and I had to have a word with her bosses. But they said to me, we weren't used to. The problem with my project was the company wasn't used to working with a marketer. They were used to working with somebody who had been given the job to find a marketing agent, a social media agency who would do the job. You're talking to a marketer.
Right.
And they said we were actually quite intimidated by you. I said, no, I want to know what you're doing, and I want to know what you're doing every day. And this is what you should be doing. And the little girl wasn't doing it. And I took issue with it, and they said, sorry, we took our eye off the ball. You're absolutely right. And by the way, we've changed the structure of our company because of what you've taught us. I thought, that's great, but I've lost money. I said, you need somebody older in there who doesn't, not silly little twitterings going on, but really focused content on behalf of your client.
Yeah.
And the agencies at the time, going back to the story, I told her to do one thing, and the following day we had an 800% increase in interest in what a book I'd written.
800, that's
800, 800% interest. But so that all the figures were there, and I said, well, that's what I asked you to do. You needed to open up what you were doing. And she said, I've never ever had such a result as that. And I said, don't get excited. It actually doesn't mean anything unless they buy.
Yeah.
So they fall in love with the great exponential in 800%. Wow, all these people have shown interest. It means nothing.
Yeah.
How many people have actually written a comment on my web page or on my Facebook page to say we love your book? Nobody. So actually, it's just a splash in the ocean that was a particularly heavy stone, and it made a lot of, it sent up a geyser, but it meant nothing.
It's all testing, isn't it?
And the younger, I think they've probably matured now, but in the early days, it was, wow. No. Where is the result of that?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And it's still difficult to read on social media. You have to have.
I prefer. Sorry?
You have to have a tangible result, i.e. 10 more people, 800% increase in purchase of book. Doesn't relate to that.
I mean, if you want to do social media yourself, obviously there's huge audiences there. We can't discount. We can't be doing, a YouTube channel about internet business and marketing and totally dismiss social media. We're just saying we don't like it. But if you're going to do it, then it's something you need to spend an awful lot of time understanding. And really, Gary Vaynerchuk famously, if you're familiar with him, he famously did that with every social media platform. He took the time to learn it inside out and understand it completely, and then mastered them. Very few people actually do that. A lot of people will go to agencies. I'm one of those. But
I'm not good with those little sort of petty sounds. Forgive me to all the expert social media specialists out there.
Yeah, and I find it hard to understand the feedback. Whereas with
you have to understand the feedback. Some of it has absolutely nothing to do with with the product you're trying to show or offer. Nothing. You could be talking about having a cocktail on a beach in Thailand, and you're trying to sell a motorbike to a Harley Davidson expert, and you find yourself talking about cocktails on a Thai beach.
Yeah. I think the analogy I heard about social media was you need to think about it as if you're holding you're selling something from the doorstep of your street to your neighbours. So you're in your neighbourhood, your community, and if people are wandering past, and you want to attract their attention and let them know that you're selling your apples or whatever it may be. But so you don't stand there shouting, apples, buy my apples, which is not a good approach anyway, but particularly not on social media, because you're trying to be social.
Yes.
If you're not naturally particularly social in that way, then it's quite an awkward thing to kind of use.
And then at what point do you bring in, by the way, I've got a Harley Davidson I want to sell?
Yeah.
When you've been talking about a Mai Tai on a beach in Thailand. Oh, by the way, would you like to buy my motorbike?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It's like meeting someone at a party for the first time and saying, hello, would you like to buy a motorbike? It's weird,
Yeah.
So that's, I don't know.
Yeah,
no,
like
I prefer,
it's like chat up lines, isn't it? Hi, how are you? Oh, it's, I love a cocktail on a beach in Thailand, or I'd love to fly to the south of France and get a boat and etc. By the way, do you like motorbike riding? Do you like motorcycles?
Yeah.
No, I don't. Right, that conversation is finished, so you can't you can't sell your product.
Moving on. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why I keep talking about motorbikes, because I have no interest in them at all. But it doesn't matter.
Yeah. No, so long story short, on the social media stuff, I've always found YouTube or Google, basically advertising on Google, very much easier to understand, and I find the results easier to analyze and
Yes.
easier to make decisions on, because I don't have any of that social. It's a bit more. I hate to use
It's
a
more focused.
modern phrase that I
I think
hate, but
it's more focused.
it's a more binary thing. It's yes, no, yes, no, yes, no.
Well, quite. And plus the
That
fact.
works, that doesn't. That works, that doesn't. There's no airy fairy kind of
Yes. Yes.
vague social mores to work out, or wokeism, or any of the.
No, and you feel that people who are
Right.
interested in your video ad are people who are actually interested in the product.
Yeah.
Rather, I mean, you're actually getting to the point of saying what you want to say.
Yeah, and I know they're interested in the product because I've done my research first.
Yeah.
Which is the other thing I like about advertising on platforms like Google and YouTube. You can, to be fair, do this on Facebook as well, but I just find it less intuitive.
Yes, I would agree. And again, I think you can be more authentic. I'm very, very hot on this idea of total authenticity. And if you're busy twittering on Twitter and playing the game on the social media, for me personally, I want to get on with the job and say, look, this is the product, and you either like it or you don't. If it appeals, please click here. You take them to a landing page, fill in the email address, send them the product, a gift, etc. As we've talked.
Yeah, I think probably the best advice I got early on was to pick a platform that you feel comfortable on and stick with that.
Yeah.
And once you're never going to completely master that, but once you've got good at that, you understand it, and you're getting results, then by all means move on to something else, or invest some of
or tie it in with something else, so you've got links going both ways.
Or pay an agency to do that. Once you've got profits coming in from the thing that you understand and are good at, then sideline some of that into someone who enjoys Facebook or TikTok. I don't even know where to start with that, to be honest. But
that's come since that's suddenly come into my awareness, this TikTok thing. No idea what it is. I ought to go and have a look, but I doubt it's for me.
Yeah, I doubt it.
Don't like the name anyway, so it won't be for me. I'm going to have to wind up, my friend, because I'm sitting here in what certainly is 28 degrees, but it's more likely to be 35. I'm being roasted in my
You're in a greenhouse, basically, yeah.
It must be 20 minutes, isn't it? It has to be. Yeah.
Okay. No, I think we've covered the basics, I think, hopefully.
I think we have. Indeed, we will be discussing what we're going to talk about next week. But if you like this video, please will you like and subscribe us, because if you like the videos, it does something to the algorithms of YouTube, as we've discussed, and more people can get to see our work. We have an email address below, which please write to us if we've had a few comments. We haven't managed to get to them this week because of the heat. But keep those comments coming in so we can really attend to what you want to ask us. And, we are here for you and want to help you as much as possible. Don't forget, you are probably over 50 with a lifetime of experience behind you and a successful career in your own field. And you're looking to have a second chance, a second career, an encore career, as Dave says, and wanted to know the basics of how to start an online business in the sort of language that people over 50 speak.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say goodbye, and I'm going to head for the shower. Bye-bye from me.
And bye from me, where it's not quite so hot here, but
I'm coming. Yeah.
See you next time.
Bye for now.